Hi everyone, this is Constellation here, and Yelan Math Guide 3 is finally ready. This math guide really gave me quite a bit of headache in terms of the rotation, especially for C0. And you guys will see why later as I talk more about within this math guide itself. So these are the categories or analysis that we'll be doing here. We have the VV Vape Comp itself, what are the characters involved, the important notes and assumptions, pretty much the same as previously except for one new point, which I will highlight later. The actual rotation itself and a alternative rotation. We'll talk about energy in the rotation and ER requirements. We'll talk about a special treat here where I throw in, because also partly because of how the rotation here works out, there's a need for me to do this comparison in this video itself. So C0 Yelan Aqua versus C0 Yelan with a Sacrificial Bow. And then we'll talk about Yelan damage and DPS in VV Vape, Yelan artifact comparison in VV Vape, and TLDR, obviously next video. So now let's look at the Vape Comp itself. Kazuha, budgets across very standard stuff, okay? No much difference. Now, Yelan, very similar to C0 application in terms of Hydro, but she provides damage boost to active character and also higher damage from her kit itself. And I know that people want me to do comparison against C6 C0, and don't worry, it's coming. Now, Hu Tao, obviously a huge fate damage with Kazuha plus Yelan or C0. Flat slot, Pyro. Now, the Pyro slot here is a bit interesting. So let's talk about Thoma. I personally would have preferred to use Thoma if not for the fact that he will steal Vapes. He has a chance to steal Vapes. In fact, if you notice how people are trying to circumvent the stealing of Vapes, they're trying to use the 5 rain swords from C0 to avoid that. But it doesn't really help much in that aspect, if you understand how the unit gauge works. So Thoma is very nice for shielding and obviously Pyro Sewer setup, but he may steal Vapes, that's the problem. Ember for easy Pyro Sewer setup will not steal Vapes, but you will not be using Ember's E, so there's an energy issue. Yen Facial support C4, obviously you need C4. And also I have not tried it out yet. I need to try out when Yelan is released, but I'm a bit concerned whether her Pyro application is enough. Not using Rainbow Comp here, because if you guys remember when I talked about Yelan back in Math Guide 1, I was saying that Rainbow Comp is actually pretty worthwhile considering because the HP percentage boost from Rainbow Comp is pretty big. But the thing about VV Vape is that you really need the Pyro Sword setup. If you use it in Rainbow Comp, if you're trying to go VV Vape with a Rainbow Comp, you have to use your Hu Tao Q to set up Pyro Sword. And that's not worth it, and that's not reliable as well, because Hu Tao Q, you should be doing it something like once every 2 rotations, because the focus is to get your damage as high as possible to dish out damage from her CA and not her Q. So you don't want high ER on her for that. So if you want to use Hu Tao Q to set up Pyro Sewer, you're gonna have to sacrifice your Hu Tao damage because you need to increase your ER in order for you to do this reliably. So overall, I'll say that's not worthwhile. Now, to simplify things, I will use Ember in this math guide for the easiest Pyro Sword setup, because without actually testing it, we can't say for sure whether we can reliably do that Pyro Sword. Pyro Sword is very important for Hu Tao's damage. Okay, important note is that assumption is pretty much the same as previously. The only new thing here is I've decided to change the A4 passive damage bonus to be assumed to share the damage bonus pool as per all the elemental damage bonuses instead of a separate multiplier. Previously, I deem it as a separate multiplier because either way the percentage difference is not big on Yelan's damage. It makes more of a difference on Hu Tao's damage rather than Yelan's. On Yelan's, it's a very small difference. So whether it's separate multiplier or elemental damage bonus for Yelan, that's not much of a difference. Okay, but I decided to go with this so that how should I put it? This is the more conservative approach where the damage is smaller. If it turns out to be a separate multiplier, that's great. Right? Yelan will do a little more damage and Hu Tao will do a lot more damage. But other than that, it's fine for you to be sharing the damage pool. So that's what we are doing here. Now next, VV Vape Rotation. Let's talk about the actual rotation itself. This is going to be a long one. But before I start, I need to put a disclaimer out here. I need actual testing. So all the rotations need actual testing to ensure hydropyro source are optimized and that Hu Tao vapes consistently. I just want to share that based on beta testers' feedback, she's able to vape consistently. Okay, there are false videos right now, it seems, out on the net, all over YouTube. Okay, not all over, but there are some false videos on YouTube using client instead of beta server footage. Then they are spreading misinformation right now. Now, it may not be their intention to do so. It may be the case that just so happens that the client doesn't work the same way as beta server. Okay, I'm not pointing fingers anyway. But one of the false video did state that beta, it works in beta. The vaping consistently works in beta, even though the footage of the video shows otherwise. Now, in case you don't know how to differentiate between client videos and beta server footage, client videos have a console command type in the bottom left corner where chatbot is. Of course, some creators may hide this, but if you see that, then it's a very clear indication that it's a client video. No doubt about it. So always take client videos with a pinch of salt. Remember the Ayato kill video against a bunch of villagers dealing 26.9k damage per tick? Yeah, no way he can do that much damage on his burst. Okay. So anyway, this is a disclaimer. Please take this in mind. Okay. Now, C0. This is the rotation that gave me the biggest headache. I'm not going to read the rotation. You can pause the rotation if you want to. You can pause the video, sorry. You can pause the video if you want to look at the rotation itself. But essentially, some key points I want to highlight are here. The first Yelan CA here is assumed to be breakthrough bow, i.e. you're already off fuel / out of combat for 5 seconds before rotation starts, which by the way naturally happens as part of second rotation because you have your Hu Tao action 9 seconds of action here. So naturally your Yelan will have her breakthrough bow. So you really only need to take note for the first rotation. For the first rotation itself, just take note to get the breakthrough bow. If I'm not wrong, her bracelet will glow when you have the breakthrough bow. The M1 here, before Hu Tao action, is for more hydro application to increases the chance of consistent vape. And also for your Kazuha to receive the energy particles coming from his E. Because after casting E, if you switch out immediately, the energy particles, the animal energy particles will go to Hu Tao. Simple as that. Now you notice that there is only one Yelan E here in the rotation as opposed to doing 2 as per my solo rotation, the general rotation. Now the reason why is that Yelan's E CD, the cooldown on Yelan's E actually starts only after the lifeline explosion. So basically you can only cast 1 E in her rotation without C1 or Sacrificial Bow. It's just not possible to do it faster than that. So you need more ER. Okay, more ER required at C0. But at the same time, without the E, you do reduce your rotation a little. So I will show you guys the actual DPS impact later. Now, even if you funnel, if you change the order, right, you do Yelan E, then followed by Yelan Q, it's only the first rotation that you get 2E of energy for C0 because you pre-funneled. But from second rotation onwards, it's just 1E because that one cast, that one pre-funnel only works for your first rotation. So it's better to build your ER assuming 1E, otherwise you will run into big trouble after the first rotation. And another thing to take note is that unlike other characters, pre-funneling for Yelan actually means lesser damage because it's one less Q proc. I mean, another example would be, say, C4 Xingqiu. You want to use Xingqiu's E after his Q in order to get a 50% damage bonus from... sorry, I shouldn't say 50% damage bonus, it's a 50% multiplier because it's a separate multiplier from his C4 effect. So the concept is very similar to the C4 Xingqiu. Okay, obviously this actually it does a lot of damage as well, this Q proc, if you are built correctly at the higher constellations anyway. So I hope this is clear to you guys how the rotation is like. I mean, this rotation actually took me a long time because without doing it in this order, your Kazuha, you won't be able to do your Kazuha E to buff your Yelan attacks. Here, you also will not be able to, how should I put it? Okay, the main thing is the Kazuha E as well as the Yelan E here. Yelan E here is not so bad, at least it's buff. So one thing is being able to use Kazuha E itself and also being able to buff. So this is C0. Okay, I finally got this rotation to work very nicely as opposed to the previous C0 rotation where you can't even get Kazuha buff. But anyway, I did not share that with you guys, so just to let you guys know why this video took so long. Okay, now alternative rotation, you can do this. This is actually very similar to the an alternative rotation for Xingqiu, where you prioritize getting. You try to make. It's basically a rotation where it's easier for you to ensure Pyro Hydro source, but in return, you get a shorter duration on your Kazuha buff and VV for Hu Tao. It's only about 3.5 to 4 seconds. So I will not do the math for this, just an option to highlight, yeah? Okay. Now let's look at C1. Alright, C0 is 19 seconds, C1 is you see here is 20.5 seconds. What does C1 do? C1 basically gives you an additional charge on her E. C0 with Sacrificial achieves the same result. So that's why it's C1 or C0 is Sacrificial here. And the rotation, as you can see, basically we have an additional Yelan E and CA here. That's what C1 does, right? But what this offers, let's talk about it here. Okay, let's talk about it in detail here. We have to do the E and CA before Yelan Q, unlike here where I mentioned that we should do it after. Why? Because we have to sacrifice a little of Yelan's damage so that Yelan's Q can last throughout Hu Tao action. We want Yelan's Q here to last for the entire 9 seconds of Hu Tao's action time. So in order to do so, we have to sacrifice a little of Yelan's damage. We cast her E and her first E plus CA before Yelan Q. So the damage that we sacrifice here is her A4 passive bonus. Because we still get the Kazuha bonus, it's just her A4 passive bonus, so it's not that big of an impact. You can also choose to pre-funnel by moving the charge attack here, this charge attack to post Q. Change the order between this CA and Q. But that does take away 0.5 seconds of Yelan's Q for Hu Tao, so I wouldn't really recommend it because like I said, you don't really need to pre-funnel. It feels wasted that we can't pre-funnel her first E particle since it's so near, right? So close to it. But if you think about it, right, you will still receive it before casting your second rotation Q. So it's still 2E of energy for her. For every time you cast your Q, you will get 2E of energy in return in this rotation. So it's not an issue. You don't really need to pre-funnel. That's what I'm trying to say here. Okay? You can choose to do so, but you do sacrifice some amount of time here for Hu Tao. Of course, 0.5 seconds may or may not make a difference, but I personally would rather align the buff duration with Hu Tao. Yeah? Now, on the bright side, C4 effect lasts 25 seconds. Yelan C4 effect lasts 25 seconds, so it will buff her first E plus CA from second rotation onwards. So the E and CA here will receive the C4 effect on second rotation onwards, so it's not completely unbuff. You also get the Kazuha buff for that matter. So it's pretty nice. The C1 rotation as opposed to C0. It is 1.5 seconds longer, but if you guys look at the DPS later, you know that 1.5 seconds is more than worth it. Okay. Let's talk about C6. C6 is essentially the exact same as C1, but we have added 6 normal attacks here as part of a C6 effect. And what these 6 normal attacks here do is that they also give you 3 Q procs while Yelan is attacking, and these 3 Q procs are buffed by her passive because she's the active character when she's using it. But in return for the 6x NA, for the last 2.5 seconds of Hu Tao action, you don't get any Yelan Q. But those 6 NAs deal approximately 240k damage with R1 Aqua, 300k with R5 Aqua. So I can tell you it will be more than the loss of vapes on Hu Tao, more than worth it to lose that 2.5 seconds on Hu Tao. Unless your Hu Tao's vape effect can give bonus 240k to 300k damage total on the last 2 charge attacks in your last 2.5 seconds. If you really think about it, it's not easy, okay? This is not the charge attack damage. This is the additional damage just from the reverse vape bonus. So I can tell you it's unlikely, even with Yelan C4 and A4 bonuses, unlikely that the Hu Tao vape effect, just the bonus from the vape effect, can confer this amount of damage. This is reverse vape, not forward vape. Okay, so yeah, I can tell you that I'm very confident that 6 NA here is definitely worth the loss of 2.5 seconds of vape on Hu Tao, on the last 2.5 seconds. Not to mention, just think about how much damage you're dealing here. I don't know what lasts long enough for this, other than those gated by phases in terms of timing. So yep, this is the C0, these are the C0, C1 and C6 rotations. Okay, as always, pause if you need to look at the rotation itself. I'm not going to verbalize every one of these rotation here, every one of these action here. Alright, now let's talk about the interesting stuff. Let's talk about energy in these 3 rotations, or to be exact, energy in the 2 between C0 and C1, because C6 is pretty much the same energy wise. Okay, so C0 Yelan without a Sacrificial Bow with Aqua, or with any other weapon really, you need 250 ER on your Yelan and 180 ER on Kazuha. That's crazy. And the above here is just energy from skills, not the energy orbs or particles from enemies here. On average, like I always say, it's about 10 energy, some scenarios less, some scenarios more. But one thing I want to highlight here is that if your ER is very high, like almost 200 ER or more than 200 ER, you will obviously get more energy from enemies. And it will mean that you can afford to have, like you see here, almost 20 energy gap between the energy from your skills versus your total amount of burst energy required. Why? Because, just a very simple example here, if you receive 7 particles from enemies in a 19-second rotation, or whatever the rotation duration is while off field, even with 250 ER, even though it's off field, you'll still get 21 energy. Of course, 7 enemies, 7 particles from enemies may sound like a lot sometimes, but it really depends on the strength of the enemies that you are facing, right? So obviously going higher ER will be safer, but your DPS will be much worse, since so much stats are already in ER. This is 250 ER, you really should not go any higher than 250 ER. If you go something like 300 ER, you basically, all your stats have to go into energy recharge. You cannot afford any crit stats on your artifacts, which is just bad for your DPS. Okay, so practically speaking, 250 ER is the way to go if you don't want to use Sacrificial with a C0 Yelan. So this is there is a very serious energy issue for C0 Yelan without Sacrificial in this VV Vape Comp specifically, because VV Vape Comp has very little E actions. Amber's E is not used to avoid interfering with vapes, while the other 3 characters you only use their E once each. Well, Kazuha does get to use it twice now, after I just tweaked the rotation this morning. Okay, let me just quickly update here. The other characters 1 each, Kazuha 2. So this also affects Kazuha's energy, and you need more ER for him. It's about 170 to 180 ER for him. Not great. Okay, it's about 170 to 180 ER for him, even with an Amber Fervornius, even with him receiving the Fervornius energy. Because right after Amber Q, we will use Kazuha to do Pyrosaur. So of course, if you choose not to use Amber, if you're using someone like Toma or Yanfei, you obviously get more energy generation because their ER will be used. But like I said, they come with their issues, right? Toma may steal vapes, Yanfei shield support requires C4 Yanfei, and Pyrosaur may be harder to achieve too, because her Pyrosaur is not like fast application, whereas Amber's Q is a very fast application, fast continuous application of Pyro for 2 seconds. So to conclude, right, for the energy section, if you intend to use C0 Yelan with a signature weapon, okay, let me remove this. This is outdated because I optimized the rotation. You need 250 ER for Yelan in a VV Vape Comp with Amber at C0 Yelan, at C0 with Aqua, her signature weapon. If you have C1 Kazuha, then it's about 220 ER for Yelan in a VV Vape Comp with Amber. Wait, sorry, this is wrong. This is also outdated. Let me just remove this. If you are not using Amber, but you are using Toma or Yanfei Shield support build, then it's about 220 ER. But Toma and Yanfei comes with their cons as mentioned earlier, and by the way, before you start complaining about her ER requirements, Xingqiu without Sacrificial and before C6 will also need about 250 ER in this comp as well. It's really the exact same thing between the two of them. Well, I will still test out all these builds like Toma, Yanfei, etc. when Yelan is out to be sure. By the way, C1 or Sacrificial is not just one more E for her, okay? It may also be an additional Q prop and a breakthrough buff charge attack as well, depending on how many enemies you mark. And depending on whether you're going to use her E after Q. Obviously, you saw in the rotation earlier, I don't want to do that for the sake of maximizing my burst up time for Hu Tao. If you want to focus on Yelan damage, obviously you can do the E after the Q. Okay? Now let's look at C0 Yelan with Sacrificial or C1 Yelan's rotation, where now we have 2 charges of Yelan's E. You'll see it's much better now. The result, the energy is okay, the ER is also lower at 144.7 ER and 180 ER here. So 180 ER versus 250 ER is a lot of difference in your DPS because of the sheer amount of stats that now can go into crit instead of ER. So energy situation is much better. Yelan ER requirement drop to 180 like I said, and with Yelan 180 ER, she only needs 10.6. She only needs 10.6 energy from enemies, which is very feasible. If you want to play safe, you can of course go for 190 ER as well. So I'll say it's like 180 to 190 ER. Now, if you don't have C1 Kazuha, it's safer to go with 160 ER on Kazuha. If you have, then you only need 10 energy, so it's still very doable as well. Now, Amber for Vonius is very important here, in order to allow the Kazuha ER value to remain a reasonably low investment. Well, same for Yelan as well. So if you want to use Allergy for the end on Amber, Yelan ER needs to be increased to 210. Kazuha ER also needs to be increased to 200. So I definitely would recommend for Vonius over Allergy for the end on Amber in this VV Vape Comp where the amount of energy generation instances are low. When the amount of energy generation instances are low, for Vonius offering one more instance of energy generation is really good. But this is on Amber, not on Yelan. Okay, Yelan needs Sacrificial for the additional E. So to conclude, I'll say 180 to 190 ER is the target for Yelan at C1 or C0 with Sacrificial Bow. For my math, I will go with 190 ER since it's the lower DPS option. Right, remember, we always try to be a bit more conservative when it comes to the math. Okay, now that I've mentioned so much here, I hope you guys can appreciate that the additional charge for Yelan, the additional E charge for Yelan, be it C1 or Sacrificial effect, is really good in this VV Vape Comp. Okay, let me repeat again, it's in this VV Vape Comp. You will see me saying this many times because I want to drill it into my viewers' mind that it's only for the VV Vape Comp. Well, maybe for the Dual Vape as well. Typically for a comp where you have poor energy generation, then the additional E charge on Yelan becomes very important. Okay, now I did some quick math for C0 Yelan Sacrificial Bow and here are the results. Okay, it's quite amazing, right? It's quite an amazing result, really. Wait, hold on, something is wrong. Okay, sorry about that, nothing is wrong. It's just that we are comparing R5 Sacrificial Bow versus R1 Aqua, which was the reason why I thought my math was comparing wrongly, but it's correct. Okay, so now you see the percentages figures here. Wait, let me just do this. Yes, now this is the correct figure. So you see here, it's a pretty amazing result because C0 Yelan with R1 Aqua is only better than R5 Sacrificial Bow for 4 emblem. Okay, now don't look at this figure here, it's not correct. You should be looking at this figure versus this figure. And this figure is not exactly correct. Okay, so it's about 1.7 to 2.4%. Now remember, you cannot look at absolute damage figure as well, you need to divide it by the DPS. Okay, divide it by the DPS so that's clearer. Remember, one is on a 90-second rotation, the other is on a 20.5-second rotation. So when you see this, I hope it's clearer, right? That the C0 Yelan with R1 Aqua is better than Sacrificial Bow. And I'm actually really comparing this figure versus this and this figure versus this. Now the difference between the R1 and R5 for Sacrificial is actually because of Kazuha, R1 Freedom Swarm versus R5 Freedom Swarm. Okay? That's the reason why there's a slight difference here. Well, not exactly slight, but there's a difference here. So effectively, C0 Yelan with R1 Aqua only better than R5 Sacrificial Bow with 4 emblem by 1.7 to 2.4%, and it's actually worse than R5 Sacrificial Bow by about 5 to 8% for all other artifact builds, whether it's 2 HOD, 2 Tenacity, or 2 HOD, 2 Nobliss, or 2 Nobliss, 2 Tenacity, or 4 HOD. Okay, so I gotta say it's been quite long since I've seen a 4-star weapon outperform a 5-star weapon for a 5-star character since Albedo. Yeah. But again, please note that this is specific to C0 Yelan in VV Vape Comp. Okay, in a comp where there's bad energy generation, then something like this can happen, where Sacrificial Bow provides so much value that only at 4 emblem does the Aqua do ever so slightly better. So the reason why Sacrificial has such a performance versus Aqua, her signature weapon, this comp with Ember is one of the most extreme comp in terms of bad energy generation. Even Xingqiu without Sacrificial and before C6 also requires 250 ER in this rotation. You gotta understand that when the number of particles generated are low, the ER required becomes much higher in proportion. Right? They have an inverse proportional relationship. So that's why it results in this scenario. Now, what advantages do Sacrificial have over Aqua that causes all this result? Number one, you can afford to go for a lower ER with Sacrificial because it resolves the low energy generation by giving you that one additional Yelan E. Number two, ER stat on Sacrificial allows you to go on the Sacrificial weapon itself, allows you to go HP sense with Sacrificial as opposed to ER sense with Aqua. That's the reason why the damage difference is so close. And on top of that, you get additional buffed E plus C on Sacrificial. And before you want to counter with that this takes additional field time, remember that's already factored in the DPS. Okay, it's already factored in the DPS. Whether how we do it is all factored in the DPS. So in other words, this is a perfect storm of factors that result in Sacrificial being better than Aqua at C0 other than with 4 emblem. And I gotta say, this also makes me wonder if Hoyoverse will make changes to change this, right? Although it's specific to this comp and maybe Vape too. So simple conclusion here, if you are not getting C1 and you intend to use her in this VV Vape comp, along with 4 emblem artifact set, I'll say that Aqua is only 1.7 to 2.4% better, so you are better off using Sacrificial. So in other words, right, you are better off using Sacrificial. Even if you're using 4 emblem where Aqua is slightly better, you're still better off using Sacrificial rather than pulling for Aqua. But this does not make Aqua bad. Okay, let's be clear. This does not make Aqua bad. The benefit of Sacrificial Bow is specific to C0. The moment you go C1, Sacrificial Bow will not be as good as Aqua. The difference between Aqua and Sacrificial Bow will be much bigger once you go C1. Let's make that clear. Okay. But that being said, right, if you're a C0 Yelan, you're going for C0 Yelan, this is actually very good because this makes Yelan F2P friendly, right? All you need to do is give her a Sacrificial Bow, and it's almost as good as a 5-star weapon, her signature 5-star weapon, at least in this VV Vape Comp. Now, in future, I will do comparison of C1 Slingshot versus C0 Sacrificial. And I hope that from the above, right, it's also clear that Favonius is very likely not as good as for her as Sacrificial is. Because remember, she really needs the additional E. I can see Favonius being good at, say, something like Yelan C1. But at C0, I'm pretty sure Sacrificial is better than Favonius, even if I've not done the math yet, just by looking at all these factors here. Okay. Okay, now let's pick up the pace here. We'll talk about Yelan damage and DPS in VV Vape. Let's look at all the damage figures. You guys see this? Let's look at 4 emblems since 4 emblem has the higher damage, right? This is the DPS per second, this is the DPS. This is very, very impressive for a character where majority of the damage is off-field, by the way. Now, before we talk about C6, let's talk about C0. I have to be honest and say that C0 DPS with Aqua is really borderline bad for a typical C0 R1. Especially due to that perfect storm of factors that I've talked about, right, in VV Vape Comp itself. Obviously, it will not be as bad in Taser Comp. Okay, in Taser Comp, it will not be as bad, for sure. It's only for VV Vape Comp. But I know that most people want to use Yelan in a Tao Vape Comp, whether it's VV Vape or Geo Vape or whatever, of Vape Flats. So you are better off using a R5 Sacrificial instead of R1 Aqua because R1 Aqua is only 2% better. And with that being the case, right, R5 Sacrificial, wait, I have a repeat here, sorry. R5 Sacrificial is 15% lower than C0 R1 Haram. But obviously C0 R1 is a lot more costly than C0 R5 Sacrificial Bow, although you can say that it's about the same as Aqua. But like I said, this is a very, very unique scenario specific to the Vape Comp. So I'll say that a better comparison would be C1 with a 3 or 4-star weapon versus C0 R1 Haran, but that will come in future. Okay? So Yelan C1 really resolved this comp's main issue beautifully, resulting in a significant boost over C0 R1 Aqua. It's about 34% with a 4 emblem and 50% with a 2 HOD, 2 tenacity. That's really crazy, by the way. Like, Ryzen C2 only gives you a 43% boost. In this specific comp, your C0 C1 gives you a 50% boost if you're using 2 HOD, 2 tenacity. If you're using 4 emblem, it's 34%. So it's really a huge boost, and it's really because of this comp. Now, I have not done the math for C1 with Slingshot or other 3 or 4-star weapons, so like I said, it will come in future. Please bear in mind that C1's value will not be as big in other comps, especially Taser with Raiden. Mainly because C0 is not as bad in other comps, it's really this Vape Comp. Now, C6 is actually looking really, really good. Oh, and by the way, just because I said that it's borderline bad, it's borderline bad for a 5-star character. It's not borderline bad for a 4-star character. That's the difference. Don't worry, I will do comparison for C2 for you guys. No worries at all. So let me continue on the point on C6, right? C6 is dealing 10.9 million at R1 and 1.28 million with R5 in 23 seconds. Or it's about 47 to 56k per second. And this is in fact 24% to 30% better than C6 Ayato in an overweight hypercarry, which is really crazy considering majority of her damage is off-field. Which means that while she's dealing so much damage off-field, you still have a Tao that's doing a lot of damage and vaporizing every hit. The overall team DPS is looking really crazy here. Now, but the difference between, just one thing to note, the difference between the two C6 is smaller than in my solo comparison because Ayato can gain from attack buffs and Yelan can't, and we've already factored all that in here. Alright? So like I said, I will compare against C6 in 2 DPS in next video. Let's look at the artifact comparison next. Now, focusing on the artifact comparison, Wait, there's a slight mistake here. Let me just quickly do this. Okay, so this is the correct figure, but I can tell you the percentages remains the same actually. I just want to make sure that the percentage figure is clear here. So as can be clearly seen, 4 Emblem is now the clear winner here with Kazuha buffs, along with some error correction on my 4 Emblem figures. I gotta say, there was some error with my 4 Emblem figures in the solo comparison. So I've corrected that, and along with the Kazuha buffs, we now have an impact here, where 4 Emblem is performing significantly better, especially at C0. Or rather, it's performing significantly better at C0, where it's 13% better. But as for the rest of the constellations, it's about 3 to 6% better. So TLDR, please farm for F4 Emblem if you intend to use Yelan in VV Vape. Now let's talk about the TLDR of this entire video. So VV Vape Comp provides higher damage for Hu Tao, with Yelan also providing high damage now, except when it's C0 with Aqua, because the comp is very bad on energy generation. Now next, these are the rotations for C0, C1 or C0 with Sacrificial, and C6. I'm not going to go verbalize the rotation, pause the video if you want to. Now for details on the rotations, why we are doing the rotations as such, please watch the specific sessions. If you ask me honestly speaking, if you ask me something that I already covered in the specific sessions, I'm not going to reply. Okay? Now, ER requirements in VV Vape. 250 ER is required for C0 Yelan without Sacrificial, and you also need to increase your Kazuha's ER to 180. For C1 plus Yelan or C0 Yelan with Sacrificial, you only need 190 ER. And in that scenario, Kazuha's ER can also be reduced to 445 to 160 ER. So I hope this is very clear. The ER requirements required 250, 190, 180, and 145 to 660. Now, C0 Yelan with Aqua Bow is only 2% better than C0 Yelan Sacrificial, R5 Sacrificial, with 4 Emblem, while it's worse by 5 to 8% with all other artifact builds. So please note that this is really specific only to this VV Vape Comp and maybe Joe Vape Comp as well, because Joe Vape Comp, the energy generation from Albedo and Zhongli aren't great as well. So please refer to the specific section for the details. Please don't take this TLDR out of context. You need to know that this is specific to the Vape Comp, VV Vape and likely Joe Vape as well. If you go Taser Comp, you will not have such a good result. Okay, when you go Taser Comp, it will not be such a huge difference, or rather such a close difference between Aqua and Sacrificial Bow. Now let's talk about her damage. C0 Yelan damage in VV Vape with Aqua is not looking good right now, due to this specific comp where the C0 rotation is very lacking in energy generation. There are two options to solve this. One is save on Aqua and use Sacrificial, two is get C1. C1 solved the main issue perfectly. That's why there's a significant boost over C0, 34% with 4 Emblem and 50% with 2 HOD, 2 tenacity. C6 Yelan's DPS is 24 to 30% better than C6 Ayato's DPS in overweight hypercarry, which is crazy considering that majority of Yelan's damage is off field. She also enables Hu Tao's high weight damage along with her A4 buffing it, which means that the overall team DPS is much higher. I can tell you the overall team DPS is definitely much higher. Which really is a testament to how broken she is. So 4 Emblem has a bigger advantage now over the other artifact builds. It's about 13% at C0 and 3 to 6% at C1+. So please equip 4 Emblem for her in VV Vape. Now, Yelan video series, the VV Vape is partially done. Why do I say partially done? Because I want to cover one more thing about VV Vape, and that C6 in Chill versus C0/C1 Yelan in VV Vape. Okay, now this video will not be too long. I'll probably try to do a bit more permutation so that there's a bit of content there, where maybe Xin Chiu, instead of using Sacrificial Sword, we also consider her with PJC, which you can afford to do so at C6. Following that, we will have weapon comparison videos, etc. And I think I want to add one more thing here, which is full HP versus crit build. Because when you see a video comparing full HP versus a crit build, if you see such a video, you have to remember that when they compare, right, if you look only at the crit damage figures, your full HP will look very good. But you gotta remember that your CR is not as high on a full HP build, so that damage figure is not consistent. But I'll talk more about that when we actually do the actual comparison, okay? So let me know in comments if there any specific map you want, and I'll join. And better yet, join me over at Twitch, where I answer almost every question there and I really look at what people are saying. Okay? Because of the time that I have, just look at how long it took me to do this VV Vape. So the Twitch link is over here, and the link is in the description as well. So please do join me. I hope the content has been helpful to you guys. If you do like the content, remember to like the video and click subscribe for more. Thanks everyone for watching. Bye.